Things are tragic and difficult, but there's always some stupid thing that you could do that could make it even worse than it has to be, so that's life. What I want, and this is how I'm going to get it, but agreeable people, especially if they're really agreeable, are so agreeable that they often don't know what they want because they're so accustomed to living for other people and to finding out what other people want and to trying to make them comfortable and so forth, that it's harder for them to find a sense of their own desires as they move through life. Look, there's situations where that's advantageous, but it's certainly not advantageous if you're going to try to forge yourself a career that just doesn't work at all. I think it's best advantageous if you're going to try to forge yourself a career that just doesn't work at all. I think it's best sort of conceptualized as a trading game. So let's say that we're going to play repeated trading games, and if you're very agreeable, then you're going to bargain harder on my behalf than you're going to bargain on your own behalf. Whereas if you're very disagreeable, you're going to do the reverse. You're going to think, I'm in this trading game for me, and you're going to take care of your own interests, where an agreeable person is going to say, no, at worst this has to be 50-50, but I'd like to help you every way I can. One of the things you have to be careful of if you're agreeable is not to be exploited, because you'll line up to be exploited, and I think the reason for that is because you're wired to be exploited by infants. And one of the things I tell agreeable people, especially if they're conscientious, is say what you think, tell the truth about what you think. There's going to be things you think that you think are nasty and harsh, and they probably are nasty and harsh, but they're also probably true, and you need to bring those up to the forefront and deliver the message. And it's not straightforward at all, because agreeable people do not like conflict, not at all. They smooth the water. The problem with that is it's not a very good medium to long-term strategy, because lots of times there are things you have to talk about because they're not going to go away. And the advantage to having a well-socialized disagreeable person is that they really don't let much get in their way. So if you can get a kid who's disagreeable socialized, that person can be quite the creature, you know, because they're very forward-moving in their nature and very difficult to stop. But if you don't get them successfully domesticated, tame, roughly speaking, by the time therefore their peers reject them, many are petrified by women. They won't approach them at all. Men get confused with women. They have no idea how to talk to them. They're just petrified into immobility. You know, it's then that's the problem too. If you're chronically rejected by people, it's often because of your own insufficiencies. You can't just brush it off as, oh well, you know, no one likes me, but really I'm okay. It's like, no, wrong. If everyone rejects you, there's probably something wrong. So imagine you had people men who could confer benefit and who were incapable of inflicted cost, and men who could confer benefit but were capable of inflicting cost. I think you'd see winners on that side because of that free rider problem. And that ties into what we'll discuss in relationship to the dark triad, because there's some mystery about why women seem to be attracted to these so-called dark triad traits. Great, and I would say that they're using them as insufficient markers for the ability to or the acquisition of status. So and narcissists capitalize on that, right? Because a narcissist looks confident, and lots of confident people are competent, but some confident people aren't competent, but they can fool you. And then I think the other explanation is that if you had to choose between a benefit conferrer who could punish free riders and one who couldn't, you should pick the former. If you're more compassionate, more empathic, you're going to feel the hunger of other people and you'd be more motivated to care for them, let's say. But it's also possible that low agreeableness has something to do with, well, perhaps hunting prowess. That might be part of it. And so women are in a conundrum with agreeableness, right? Because they need a mate who's agreeable enough so they can bond with them and it will care for their children and it cares in general, but they need someone who's disagreeable enough so that they're capable, let's say, of dealing with free riders. Women are attracted to some degree to the lower agreeable types, and I think that accounts for the bad boy paradox that you described, at least in part. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today, because you need to have a hierarchy of improvement. You need to be aiming some for something, and that means you're going to be lesser than people who've already attained along that dimension. So say I see somebody in the room here hypothetically and I said, oh my gosh, I would love to, have that kind of a life. I'd love to make that kind of money, right? And I compare myself to them, right? Oh my gosh, what if One day I can be that person. What if one day I can have that life? Right? Well, the first thing I think you need to understand is that these people that you're comparing yourself to, you don't really know very well, and what that means is that you see their shining outside but you don't see the reality of their life. Maybe you're in California, see someone speeding down the road in a convertible Porsche, you think, oh man, what a lucky bastard. And the truth of the matter is that thinking about wrapping his expensive sports car around the next cement pillar that he comes close to, you can't tell. And people have hard lives, and even people who are comparatively fortunate have hard lives, and the ideal that you're observing that makes you jealous and resentful is in large part an illusion that's created by your own mind. I can give you just one example. Is like I know a fair number of extremely wealthy people, and most of the people I happen to know are people who've made them their money themselves, and I tell you, man, they have a burden of responsibility that would crush me, would crush the typical person. They're just working flat out like 90 hours a week, and they have thousands of people depending on them, and they have their money, and they have their status, and that's not nothing. But don't be thinking that they don't have your temperament, they don't have your troubles, they don't have your abilities. The only person that has those is you. Even if things are going really well for you now, there's going to be a time in the future where things are rough. You're going to be ill, family members going to be ill, a dream is going to fall apart, you're going to be uncertain about your employment status. Like the flood is coming, right? The apocalypse is coming. It's always the case in life. So the question is, who should you defeat in the final analysis? And the answer is you should. There isn't a price to be paid for that. They don't see their families, they're often divorced, they don't see their children grow up, and they don't have time off. You have to be careful of what you're jealous of because you don't really know what it is. And then the other thing that's kind of useful is to understand that you're different from else, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself to them because they're not like you. They don't have your family. Defeat your former self. You should be constantly trying to do that, and you're the right control for yourself too, because you're the one who's had all your advantages and disadvantages. And so if you want to compete fairly with someone, then you should be competing with you. If you're improving yourself, then what you are doing is competing with your lesser self. And then you might ask, well, what is that lesser self? And that lesser self would be resentful and bitter and aggressive and vengeance seeking, and all of those things that go along with having a negative moral character, and those are things that interfere with your ability to progress. Go along with having a negative moral character, and those are things that interfere with your ability to progress as you move forward through life. Could you be slightly better tomorrow than your currently flawed self? And the answer to that is, if you have enough humility to set the bar properly low, then you could be better tomorrow than you are today. You might say, well, what's the right way of being in the world, if there is such a thing? And it's not acting according to a set of rules, it's attempting continually to transcend the flawed thing that you currently are, and